Good morning, afternoon, and evening to all those who have joined us from around the world. My name is Josh Truman. I'm the Vice President at Convergence.Tech. And today we have an amazing panel who will be discussing the future of learning with a hyper focus on newer learning models. We're going to cover some important questions with a few of the world's most innovative EdTech business leaders. And I'm very excited to get this conversation going. So for all the viewers out there, please buckle up for a great discussion. And just to give you an idea of what to expect, here's the format that we're going to use today. We're going to take a few moments for each panelist to briefly introduce themselves and a little bit about their background. And then I'm going to kick the conversation off by asking a few questions to draw out some of those high-level themes and trends that we should be thinking about. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Grant, if you don't mind introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about your background. We can go ahead and get the conversation started. And to you, Grant, thank you.
Thanks very much, and good day all. My name is Grant Lichtman. I'm coming to you from just north of San Diego on the ancestral lands of the Kumeyaay Nation. After a career in the for-profit world, I worked for a decade and a half as a senior administrator of a large independent school. For the last 10 or 12 years, I've had the great fortune to work with something north of 225 or 250 schools and districts around the United States, Canada, and around the world, helping school communities understand and embrace the transformational changes that are taking place in education. And I get to share my work by writing books and that sort of thing. And so thanks very much for letting me join this incredible panel.
Thank you, Grant. Betty.
Hi, folks. I'm Betty Vandenbosch. I'm the Chief Content Officer at Coursera. What does a Chief Content Officer do? Well, as you know, Coursera is a platform with about 87 million learners, and it requires content. So the job that I do is help make sure that our learners get the content they're looking for, and our partners are able to share the content that they're best able and most qualified to share. Prior to that, I was the Chancellor of Purdue University Global, and prior to that, the President of Kaplan University.
Thank you, Betty. Jake.
Thanks so much, Josh. It's great to be with this amazing crew. Betty and I met years ago in Boston when she was still at Purdue Global, and it was in a similarly stimulating group of individuals that sort of has left me since that. I think probably since that day, inspired about the future of education in a way that I think only groups like this can inspire. So thank you for bringing us together, Josh, and Convergence. So my name is Jake Rishalin. I run workforce development for LinkedIn. What that means is I negotiate agreements or public-private partnerships with governments to try to help unemployed folks get access to our labor market information, our online learning, and our job matching to help them get skills and jobs. The background for that is about a decade of trying to figure out how to create social impact at scale. I was a public international and international criminal lawyer and an intellectual property lawyer. I started Canada's largest software development bootcamp. But really what sort of brings me here today is a desire to figure out how education and technology can together help individuals close skills gaps, get access to opportunity, and lead more productive and happier lives. And I think that the variety of companies and organizations on this call actually are already playing an instrumental role in that. And I'm excited to discuss further how we can work together on it.
Awesome. Thank you, Jake. And Ray.
Hello, Rey Justo, live out here in Sacramento, California. In 2020, when COVID hit, I lost my job, I lost my home, and kind of backed into a corner, didn't know what to do. And then Sacramento hosted a pilot program called the Digital Upskill Program, which took us through a course through Coursera to earn our certification in 8 weeks. So dove in for that, gave it my all, and straight out of the program, for the first time in my life, I actually got a career thanks to the certification I received. And it wasn't too long after that, I was able to buy my first house. And now here I am with this awesome panel. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Ray. It's my first time getting the chills on this call. That's awesome. Kristen.
Hi there. My name is Kristen DiCerbo. I'm the Chief Learning Officer of Khan Academy. And we, as many of you know, focus on providing content for K to 14 learners across a variety of disciplines. And my career has been spent bringing what we know from education research and the learning sciences to building digital learning experiences. So have done that in a variety of ways, but focusing on that educational psychology, how we know how people learn and how we can use that to build better experiences for learners.
Excellent. Thank you, Kristen. And timely enough, it's actually your question number one. So you're in the hot seat. And that question is, how are each of your organizations or you individually empowering students?
Yeah, I will kick this one off and happy to hear what other folks have to say as well. One of the things that we know from research is that students who are what we might call self-regulated learners, students who can set goals for themselves, who are able to monitor whether they're making progress towards their goals, making shifts in how they're thinking about learning, end up with having better learning outcomes. So we really want learners to own their own learning and to be able to think of themselves as the drivers of their learning. So at Khan Academy, we do a number of things, from little things to big things, to help try to encourage that. So everything from encouraging students to reflect on whether they should take a hint or try a problem next, depending on how confident they feel in their answer and how they're learning. So little things like that to big things like exploring new content areas that they're excited to learn something about, and understanding how different places in math intersect with science and how they all work together to help us understand the world and to get excited about learning and learning new things. So all of those pieces fit together as we think about helping those students really be able to think of themselves as learners as they're going through their whole careers.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristen. Anyone else have any thoughts on the question? How are we empowering students?
On the LinkedIn side, I think it's actually sort of the combination of data, of information about what jobs are out there, what skills are necessary for those jobs, even where to learn those skills and how to acquire them. In some cases, we provide them via LinkedIn Learning or access to other platforms like, sort of Coursera's equivalent edX is actually delivering its content via LinkedIn Learning now as well. And in some cases, we're just referring folks to post-secondaries. They're finding their educations, the students are finding what school they want to go to on our platform or the job that they want to go to from that school. There are specific resources we've been building during the pandemic and even beforehand to help folks make that transition. So for instance, there's something called Career Explorer, which will show you adjacent skills. If you're an out-of-work bartender, it'll show you what jobs have similar skills to those that you learned probably as a bartender or were able to demonstrate as a bartender. And then if, for instance, I'm making this up, but a job in retail or a job in customer service is adjacent. My favorite one is 911 call center responders, actually have a lot in common with bartenders. Then we'll show you what skills are necessary to make the leap from bartender to 911 call center responder and how to get those skills. So I think it's that ability to both understand and then actually act on that understanding of what jobs are available and sort of get somebody away from the lifeboat type, just pay the next bill jobs to actually a career where one can earn and learn, where one can begin to build towards one's sort of lifelong aspirations. And I think as of yet, I'm quite excited about both what LinkedIn and even Microsoft, who with us have been building tools like Career Coach and Career Connector to specifically help students achieve their aspirations.
Thank you, Jake. And Betty, did you have a
So for us, everything on course, not everything, but just about everything on Coursera is something you can audit. So the way that we empower folks is we give them a chance to try things. And you can try things in a bunch of different fields. Now we have a lot of STEM on our platform, obviously, and folks can try something, and if they like it, they can take the tests and they can move on and stack into something bigger. And if they don't like it, they can move on to something else. Basically, no harm, no foul. And we have found that during the pandemic, women have been particularly interested in changing careers. And we've had more women in STEM than we've ever had before. And they're taking all kinds of courses to build their skills so that they can basically automation proof and COVID proof their careers. because once you're in STEM, once you're in a digital world, you can work from many more places, maybe not always anywhere, but many more places, and you're empowered to take that next step. So basically, at a very high level, that's how we think about empowering folks to do what makes sense for them and to make sure that they move into a career that's good for them and for their families.
You know, everything that you folks are doing is just so fabulous. I think the reality on the ground in the K-12 space, and Khan Academy knows this as well as anybody, because they were such pioneers in trying to empower students. One of the real realities is that our teachers are still very reluctant to let go of their role as the decision maker and the provider of education. And what I really see amongst what we would all consider the really leading schools in this area is schools and teachers that are really willing to empower their students to be co-developers of their own learning process. When I often say to teachers, try one thing for a day. From the moment you walk into your classroom to the moment you leave, keep track of everything that you did today that a student could have done for herself. And your list will be very, very long, most likely. And just start letting those things go. Every time we do something for students that students could do for themselves, or don't involve them in a decision-making process about their education, we're robbing them of an opportunity. And so the sorts of things that I know Khan is doing, and it sounds like some of the others are doing, if we can bring those down into the K-12 space really robustly and get students involved at a very granular level of co-developing their learning process, that to me is winning the game.
Very good point, Grant. It's how do we get teachers, and I was a teacher and had the same issues. How do we get teachers to go from sage on the stage to guide on the side, right? So fantastic. Well, let's jump into question number 2 for Betty. And the question is, how is your organization connecting education to work skills as well as life skills?
So, you know, you've just given me an opportunity to spend the whole rest of our time together, and I'll try not to do that. You know, at Coursera, we have university partners and we have industry partners. And our industry partners are particularly important because they provide, obviously, industry training. They include companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon Web Services, IBM, Microsoft, and the top domains are business, technology, data, and health. So that's how we start. But that's only the beginning. We have a series of entry-level certificates that are offered by companies like the ones I just mentioned, that are programs that help open doors for people to enter new careers. And Ray, in a minute, I'm going to let you talk more about exactly how that helped you, because you took one of our entry-level certificates. They're designed to prepare people without a college degree or relevant experience. You could have a degree in English or philosophy, take an entry-level certificate, and in the course of just a few months, in Ray's case, 8 weeks, you can enter a new career in the digital economy. And the growth of the share of folks participating in these programs has been great. We now have more than 1.6 million enrollments in these kinds of courses, and we have about 15 of them right now on the platform. What's most exciting to me, because I'm an old STEM woman who didn't have a lot of company when I was new in my career, women are taking these programs nearly 50% more than they did in 2019. And the great thing about these credentials is then they stack into a higher credential, like a degree. So the Google IT certificate stacks into a degree in computer science at the University of London. So the great thing is you start with something that will get you that first job, or that job that is automation proof. And then you can move on and up through stackable credentials to something that is a lifelong career. So that's our number one way to make this happen for folks who need to connect education to work. One other thing I'd like to bring up is the work that we've done since the beginning of the pandemic with governments. We are working with governments to offer our programs to the unemployed in their areas. And we're supporting, again, millions of people. Everything counts in large amounts. It's millions of people across the globe who are taking courses on Coursera to prepare them for a job that exists today. So those are the sorts of things that we're doing. I don't know, Ray, if you want to talk a little bit. I'm not the person running the show here, but I'd love to hear how your experience happened and what happened for you in the Google IT certificate.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started the program, I was actually going to college prior to entering the digital upskill program, and it was very slow paced. And like, even though it was all virtual, I was on my own, and I didn't get much support from the professor nor the college. So I felt just isolated, like I can kind of do this on my own. When I jumped into the digital upskill program and they introduced Coursera and that material, I actually got more support through the course in Coursera than I was in college. So when I progressed through that and I got out, and all the technical knowledge that I got from the Google IT cert really prepared me to transition to Zenify, which is my job now, because my ultimate dream job was to be a developer. And Zenify gave me a pathway to reach that dream of mine. And in order to get there, I needed to have those basic IT skills, like help desk skills that I learned from Coursera. And Zenify moves very fast, and they support you along the way as well. But having that experience going through the digital upskill program really put me in a position to succeed with Zenify. So it's really all thanks to Coursera and the way it was outlined, and of course the program itself. Really taking this 6-month program and cramming it into 8 weeks, it gave me that skills to adapt to so much info and be able to put it in a workplace so rapidly. So yeah. So thanks, Coursera.
I really appreciate that. Any other thoughts, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a sort of bizarre situation here where our network was in part created to facilitate access to jobs via networking. And the reason I say I'm in an awkward situation is because I've been spending a lot of time recently thinking about both the positive and the negative effects of 80% of jobs being achieved via networking. And that's not just on our platform. And I think in the world in general, 80% of people get a job based on who they know. And if it's not based on who they know, it's what degree they have, or it's based on how many years of experience they have in a given area. And we know that all three of those things facilitate inequality and inequity and discrimination in a variety of different ways. So part of what I've been trying to think about, and I think we at LinkedIn more generally have been trying to think about, is how do we get to a more skills-based future wherein people's careers are based much more on their competencies, on their skills, on what they're capable of and what they're excited about than what degree they have or who they know. That said, a lot of what we teach on our platform is how to network, right? It's how to get a job via connecting to other people, because practically speaking, that's not going to change anytime soon. And so I think there is this interesting tension and balance between learning how to dress for work, learning how to network, learning some of the basic sort of work skills, which often actually fall into the human soft category, and then also figuring out the way to move society as a whole to a future that doesn't rely as much on signals like degrees, which I think, as Coursera has managed to sort of debunk, don't necessarily, like the 4-year formal in-person education doesn't necessarily represent either the future of education or even an ideal.
I'm not sure, Jake, that I agree with you completely in terms of skills and, oh, never mind about the degree. For me, until all of us watching this program and everybody in the world says, oh, I don't care if my kid gets a degree or not, degrees are still going to be important. And I think what we're doing is helping people who didn't perhaps get it right the first time, who took a degree in a field they don't no longer care about, or who didn't get it right because life got in the way, giving them an opportunity to learn skills and start working. But that doesn't necessarily mean that degrees aren't important. Degrees are still the coin of the realm. And certainly on Coursera, we are very bullish on how important degrees are to everybody, to adult learners and to people just starting out. The difference, I think, is how you get to a degree. And if you can get to a degree in bite-sized chunks where none of your learning gets wasted and it all adds to something that is an officially sanctioned credential, that's the ideal. But there are many, many steps and stopping off points in the meantime.
Yeah, I mean, I love that idea of many paths to the same future, where the future, in this case, is recognition from a post-secondary in the form of a degree. I worry, I mean, in countries like Canada, where 80%, I'm based in Toronto, where 80% of the population has some form of post-secondary, there isn't really as much of a question of sort of the value of a certification or associate's degree, et cetera. In America, where 50% of the population doesn't, it becomes a bigger question of, are those individuals going to achieve their career objectives the way Rey did, which I think involves a Coursera course, but not necessarily sort of a full-fledged 4-year degree? Or is there another means by which, I think there's some fascinating states where they've actually given prior learning credit for students having accomplished parts of their college associate's credentials. And therein, both the post-secondaries benefited because they had access to federal funding, but more importantly, these students all of a sudden had recognized the skills that they acquired in 3 years of community college instead of 4, or in 1 year of community college instead of 2. And I think that idea that we could be more flexible about how we add up the different parts of our experience. My favorite example is I spent a lot of time working with newcomers and how new immigrants can acquire jobs. And they're always wondering how to tell the story of their 4 years traveling across 3 or 4 refugee camps. And for me, they probably learned more skills. They had more trying experiences that demonstrated their resilience and their communication skills and project managing a family of 4 through 3 different border crossings than most of us have in a lifetime. But you have to be able to tell that story, and you have to be able to package it. And it's going to be hard to package it in the form of a degree.
Jake, that's great. Well, I think, Jake, now that you're in the hot seat, might as well keep you right there. And the next question is for you. So the question is, how do your platforms foster the development of both technical and human skills? And what are some of the limitations and also the opportunities your organizations see regarding skill development?
Again, a question that brings to mind a tension for me between the fact that you have to learn human skills, what some people call soft or fundamental skills. And I think Kristen actually did a good job of breaking those down into multiple different categories instead of just like all of the fundamental or essential skills. But most human skills, by definition, need to be learned with other humans interacting. And that makes it a little harder to learn them online. It's not impossible because there are groups on LinkedIn and you can interact with our instructors on LinkedIn Learning, and the same is true on Coursera in terms of sort of facilitated mentorship, et cetera. I think it's fantastic that these programs are building in some aspects of the social human elements of learning into online, largely asynchronous platforms. On the other hand, I don't think there's anything that can put a T to an in-person group experience where a group is trying to solve a problem together to learn some fundamental human skills like teamwork, et cetera. On the other hand, technical skills, we are now almost 100% sure that some people learn better online. Some people learn better exclusively online, and almost all of us learn better, at least in a hybrid fashion, to varying degrees, depending on our personality. So there really is this split between what you can learn at least as well, if not better, online, technical skills, and those skills which I think will always require at least a human to assess properly, because they are fundamentally human skills, and we have to safeguard that. Like, it's important for our future that we protect the humanity of some aspects of, or the quality of some aspects of our skills that are unique to us as humans and that a machine can never replicate.
Thank you, Jake. Any thoughts by other panelists? Kristen?
Yeah, I just want to echo that we shouldn't fall into kind of the trap that some that can be that the technology is going to fix everything. We saw it in this past year, especially in the K-12 world, that relationship between teachers and students is really important. And it's important for social and emotional growth, but it's also important for learning. We actually have a saying at Khan Academy that human high fives beat computer confetti. Like, it is more motivating for your teacher to give you that high five, give you that pat on the back, than to see the, yay, you did it, confetti on the computer. So those human relationships are so important, and we shouldn't let our fascination with technological solutions start to try to overcome some of those human things that are important for us to be successful.
Yeah, and I think Khan Academy is a great example of finding this finding this balance. We don't want students. I don't want students to have to choose between I'm either going to, and again, I'm talking about the K-12 space, not the I've started my first career and I'm changing career space. The K-12 space, we don't want students to choose between I'm going to either learn all virtually or I'm going to go to school. And the best way to do that is to have offerings that are really small bites that can be embedded within curriculum, within the class day, that can align with other standards, and students can learn, get a little bit of module here, a little bit of module here, but then have their classroom of peers and their teachers to work with them and assist them. So I don't think we want these things to be an either or a standalone. I think the best way to do it is to have great companies like yours and platforms work with the K-12 system and get these things pushed down in little tiny bits. Now, I don't know what that does for your business model. It may not be very good at all. Khan Academy, I believe, is still not for profit, though have a good revenue stream. So I don't know what the business model aspects of it are, but from a learning point of view, I think that's really the direction we need to be aiming.
I think there's also an important thing that we have to realize, and that is that it's not always possible for people to have the one-on-one interactions that they would prefer. And something is better than nothing. A classic, for me, classic example of that is last year during the pandemic, a course that we had on the platform called not Learning How to Learn, that's another story. I'm sorry, The Science of Well-Being. I'll tell about Learning How to Learn in a minute. The Science of Well-Being by Laurie Santos at Yale University had millions of people. And why? Because millions of people didn't feel very good and they needed something to help them feel better. And it was important, it was immediate. And if all those folks had tried to find courses at well, they couldn't have because community colleges were closed, but it just isn't always possible. And then they now had one of the world's, perhaps the world's expert in well-being, teach them. So it's not perfect. It probably would be way better to be in one of her sections at Yale, but 3.9 million people can't do that. So this is not a bad second. And I think that's something we all have to remember, that things aren't always perfect. And that's why we've got to keep working to give people as much as we possibly can.
To your point, Betty, I took that course, or at
Oh,
least
you
I
did?
began that
Great.
course, and it was incredible, and it was everything that you just described and more, to the extent that it helped one feel better at a time when it was really, really hard to feel good. And I think you're right that we can probably separate the techno-utopianism of like we're going to solve everything via online platforms from the online platforms are actually helping a lot more people than were ever helped before, much in the way that when I worked in access to medicines, pharmaceuticals have actually uplifted more people's lives, have given people a better standard of living over the past century than anything else in history. But there's a lot of problem with pharmaceuticals. Like I'm still really angry that we haven't, broken the patents on the COVID vaccines, but that's a separate story from like pharma's done a lot of good, just like our platforms have, I think, done a lot of good and will hopefully continue to do so.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts to close up this question? If not, we will jump into the final question, which is for Grant. And that question is, how can we as individuals or as organizations help bridge the gap between education and the workforce?
Well, like Betty, there's about 6 different ways to take these questions. And so I'm going to take my time to maybe retool the question just a little bit, because I think that the folks, I want to pose a slightly different question to the folks on this panel that I think has really been intriguing and troubling me. And it has to do with large swaths of America that are really struggling over what their students are going to do in the workforce when they leave school. And that's sort of middle rural America. I've worked with several small school districts in rural America where the students have a real choice and the communities have a real choice. We're going to provide these sorts of learning opportunities to our kids. They're going to get all excited about good high-paying jobs. They're going to go to a coding boot camp. And then they have two options. One, they leave the town, or two, they work from home. And if they leave the town, these towns are going to cease to exist within the next decade or two. And this is thousands of communities across America. And the fact of the matter is that these students are making these whether they're making these decisions consciously or they're being tracked into these decisions, it really starts down in middle school and certainly in high school. So what are the ways that we can get students to understand what good paying jobs there are out there, some of which might exist in their own communities that are, there are many, the welders, the plumbers, the electricians. These are great paying jobs that are going unfilled today that might exist in some of these communities if they don't want to leave, or if they don't have great broadband access, or their proclivity is not necessarily to the high tech sector. I think there needs to be a great deal more vertical integration between the folks like are on this call, certainly the Coursera's and the LinkedIn's, and maybe then overlapping with the Khan Academy space, really down to the middle school and the high school level, so that students identify opportunities for themselves where they don't have to make that choice of, I'm either going to leave my family and my community to get a well-paying job, or I'm going to stay here and sort of be stuck working at McDonald's. And I'm not casting aspersions on McDonald's, but I think you know what I mean. I don't have the answer to this at all. I'm not sure anybody does, but boy, it's something that I think is existential for large swaths of this country.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts, Betty?
Oh, yeah. I work for Coursera, and I joined Coursera at the beginning of the pandemic, right at the beginning, the April 2020. And I have many colleagues I've never met. I live in Chicago. I plan to work in Chicago for now until forever. And while it's not perfect, it enabled me to work for Coursera, and it enabled Coursera to hire me. We now at Coursera allow anybody in the world to work from many countries, not every country in the world because of tax laws and everything else. But what that has done for Coursera is it has broadened the diversity of our organization along many, many, many dimensions. The obvious, the locational diversity, racial diversity, gender diversity, everything is now more possible. And while I agree, not everybody is suited to working from home in the digital space, I think the fact that so many companies are opening up to that has really been a benefit of the pandemic. To say that anything is good out of the pandemic, but this is one thing that really has changed the tenor, certainly of our company, and we hope of many others, because it's good. It's really good when people from all over work together. So while I agree with you, Grant, we don't want all these small towns to implode, there are options related to digital work that open that up wide open.
And what's interesting is I think we've actually come full circle to the same yes and that we had earlier about the need for sort of human and technical skills, or the fact that our platforms are both doing a lot of good and aren't going to solve every problem. And to make it like slightly more specific to what each of you just said, Grant was pointing out the huge need for people in the trades in North America, which we just can't seem to pull because culturally we haven't made those sexy professions, despite every other factor making them ideal. In the same way, we probably could make home care and a lot of the healthcare roles that are going unfilled, but which require human interaction, which are going to make us happy the same way the course that I took on Coursera did, or in a similar manner, I should say, that those human interactions and human roles should be valued more and paid more, and we can fix parts of society through those roles at the same time, and maybe even those organizations can learn from where some of the more financially already rewarded digitally capable organizations like ours have gone. I mean, I think the line that LinkedIn used where they basically said, we trust you in terms of where you're going to work, as long as, to Betty's point, it's not breaking any laws and your manager is okay with it, et cetera. The general principle is we trust you in terms of where we can work from now on. And I think that's the general principle that employers should be adopting irrespective of remote work, right? It's just a new form of relationship between employees and employers. And when that trust no longer exists, they probably shouldn't be working at that company. But I like that we're sort of growing as a society through this, yet another silver or bronze lining of the pandemic.
Absolutely. And I think, Betty, you bring up a really important point, and I appreciate the positive spin on the disruption of COVID, right? There's a lot of things that have changed from education to the way we work. And I think it's important to take some positives out of it. So I agree that this atmosphere is all possible because of digital, right? Because we are able to connect virtually. Things kept moving on. And I can't imagine a life where we didn't have this, what would have happened. So appreciate the taking the positive spin on quite a disruption that we've had. Any other thoughts on that final question? All right.
If
Well,
there's not, can I take us on another detour?
Absolutely. I love detours.
Betty, you just quickly, like by accident, mentioned the Learning How to Learn course, but I love the Coursera Learning How to Learn course. So I wonder what Coursera thinks about that. When we go back to that question about empowering learners, teaching them how to learn seems important. And I think it links back also to this question of, if you're able to acquire new skills at multiple points in your lifetime, you can be more flexible about where you work and what you do and what that might look like.
Yeah, now Learning How to Learn is a terrific course. It's by Barb Oakley from Deep Teaching Solutions. It's had more than 3 million enrollments. So Kristen, you're not alone. It's spectacular. And what makes a course like that spectacular is anybody at any age can learn how to learn, either as a review or really for the first time, really thinking about how the neurology works with what you're doing in the world. And I think the beauty of places like Coursera is you can learn things that you need when you need them. So we had Learning How to Learn. I want to go to school. I've got to make sure I know what I'm doing, build a little confidence. Another great example comes from the University of Alberta. They have a course called Indigenous Canada. And as those of you who are Canadians know, Canada has had lots of press and lots of challenges dealing with its past and how it dealt with Indigenous peoples. This course attacks that head on. And when people didn't know how to think about it, they went to that course. So they probably didn't take a course on Indigenous peoples when they were in school, but now they need it and it's there. And I think that that's how we evolve as adults. We say, okay, I need this now. Where can I get it? And we want something that's high quality. There's a lot of learning that is very brief. In an hour, do this. In 20 minutes, do that. And that's great if you need something that's 20 minutes worth of effort. So for example, I use YouTube often to change a bicycle tire and to do things that I'm just not that good at. But there's also a human need to learn deeply, and having those options are what makes the difference. Having options on Learning How to Learn, the science of well-being, COVID, contact tracing, you only need that when you need it. And that's the kind of learning that I think we all can benefit from. So yes, it really is important to have lots of different options for lots of folks at different levels.
Betty,
Amazingly,
can I assume that most of the people who took Learning How to Learn are 18 years old and up? Would that be the case?
Yes, because most of our learners are adults.
Sure.
Absolutely.
So are companies like yours thinking about, to me, that's exactly what I want, but how can we port that over to an appropriate course for 8th graders or 9th graders or 10th graders? Because that's where learning how to learn is such an important human skill that's going to be embedded for their lives. Are you thinking about doing that?
So Kristen, you're waving your hand. Why don't you speak first and then I'll talk about it.
Well, first, let me say this is not a product announcement. This is not an announcement of anything. But as the Chief Learning Officer, I can say it's on my radar to think about something like that at Conacademy.
And certainly, you know, on Coursera, we don't say you can't do this. And I would encourage teachers around the country to look at that material and see if it makes sense for them and for their students. In some instances, depending on age, it might be not that interesting if you're 12 years old because the examples are wrong, but the concepts are very, very strong.
Excellent.
And my guess is for the younger audiences, I think there's this general truth that, you know, the younger the individual is, the more impact education will have over the course of their lifetime. I think that's absolutely true, and why K-12 is so important, and sort of why I always feel a little bit of guilt that I don't focus enough on K-12. At the same time, I think there's probably something to the requirement that there'd be more in-person time is higher the younger you are. So I'm wondering if some of the having to like learn how to learn for quite young folks, I don't know whether it's 8th grade or 4th grade or 10th grade, but that they actually have to learn more from other people in person, from role models. Like, you know, having parents with books all around was probably and newspapers all around was probably very helpful for me relative to a parent who, you know, a child who had to come home without those regular prompts to read or to learn in another form. And so I wonder whether there is a bit more of a slant towards, yes, we can use the Khan Academies and the Coursera's as content within a K-12 setting, but some of that learning to learn at that level really has to be in person.
So, you know,
it's also amazing. Sorry, go ahead, Betty.
Yeah, on the Coursera platform, we certainly do this at the university level, where universities around the globe use Coursera courses to augment what they have in their classrooms. Some universities do it because they don't have the faculty to teach honors level courses. Some use it because their material is very theoretical and they'd like some practical experiences. So they want their students to take a course from IBM or Google or Facebook or deep learning. And sometimes it's because they want to broaden what's available at their institution, because not every university can offer everything. Now that concept works exactly the same way in K-12. There's no reason why folks couldn't look at the content on Coursera and say, okay, we don't want the whole thing, but we'll take that video and we'll take that assessment and we'll figure out how we can pull all this together to help our students in a way that's hybrid, completely hybrid. You do this at home, you come to school and we talk about it.
And that unbundling is so dynamic and positive as a means of changing systems. Like K-12, like post-secondary, is amongst the most calcified systems, human system that exists in society. And in order to break through it, in order to do, I think, Grant, what you spend a lot of your time talking to institutions and systems about, you need to have easy examples so that a faculty member can take a course and be relatively clear that, like, to jump back to the post-secondary level, Econ 101 shouldn't be replicated at all of the 200 post-secondaries in Canada. Rather, we should have a few of the sort of top Econ 101 profs teaching X and Y and Z component, which every other prof can then use in their Econ 101 class that's customized to the local setting or the level of the students, or et cetera, et cetera. And it's that idea that we can be a little bit more flexible about how content is created and delivered, et cetera, that really was what lynda.com, LinkedIn Learning's predecessor, was founded on. It was created as a platform to help teachers teach at scale. And in fact, the fact that 70% of post-secondaries in North America use LinkedIn Learning to do some aspect of teaching or professional development for faculty or IT support is in part because of that same tradition where they're learning to teach instead of learning to learn via an online platform.
Excellent. Well, Jake, that was a fantastic kind of closing comment. And I just want to take a moment and first of all, thank you for the conversation. This was fantastic. And I really appreciate the laughter. We laughed, we smiled, we took some detours, which was fantastic. This conversation is exactly what I was hoping for. So on behalf of Convergence.Tech, I just want to thank you all for taking the time today. And I'm really excited to continue the conversation, hopefully again. With that, have a fantastic day and we'll talk again soon.